Okay, welcome to the final demo. I ended up doing a small drone, futuristic drone vehicle, and I tried to factor in all the ideas we've been talking about. So let's go. Okay, here's a few sketches I did before I started the drone piece. I just kind of wanted to get my thoughts together. You can see that down here is the final. Uh, get a nice bright color. This is kind of what I ended up with down here. I just wanted to make sure I knew what it looked like from the side. Um, I wanted something that kind of looked like an F-22 or an F-35. I looked at a lot of photos of those planes before I started, and I looked at drones and UAVs, which are unmanned aerial vehicles, I think. And I also had an idea for this little this like attachment that it would carry in its underbelly with this weird laser weapon uh, as a that has like a sphere in the front of it in the front. I was playing around with like other kind of disc like sort of reflectors or beam generators or things like that, and then I finally settled on this sphere idea. I tried a disc-like thing here, and then I thought, oh, let me do another disc with like lots of segments, but with a sphere in the middle to kind of give it a focal point. And then I tried that a couple times. I did it over here as well, and I was thinking about different paneling and different kind of shapes for the some sort of reflectors or the beam generator. But I like this sphere, and then I ended up just having there be a some kind of rail or attachment device. And I kind of got the rail idea from, let me pull up my reference real quick, from this photo. And I love this photo because it just says so much in one picture about this machine and the device and how it's all attached and the construction, the hull of the helicopter. Anyway, there's a ton of great info in here. Um, but what I kind of remember from this is this like rail holder that I'm assuming in here somewhere there are attachments that grip onto this missile. Not that they come out and grip the missile, but that they somehow attach right here and keep the missile stuck. There's probably a hole or something on the missile where it connects to. And I love this piece here that is like the big. I don't know what this. I want to really look at the anatomy of this thing and see what's going on. There's some sort of tank right here. Anyway, I really like the feeling of this big bulbous part at the end of the wing that has this rail kind of device hanging off of it. A little bit of negative space. You can kind of see between things just a little bit. And then the business end of this whole thing is hanging below. Um, anyway, I love this picture. So I wanted to get the feeling of this kind of rail attachment type deal. So that's why I ended up with kind of like this long part with a little bit of the weapon kind of exposed at the end and in the underneath the device, or underneath the whole drone, sorry. Um, and I wanted to show a little more detail around here and around like these areas would have some exposed detail because we're seeing um, up into the drone because it opens up to hold the rail. So there isn't really a good sketch of that on this page, but um, anyway, really quickly, you can see I started playing around with different body shapes. First, I was going to do a disc, and then I thought, let me get something a little more aerodynamic to make sure we can read what it does. And then I ended up with this tiny, sort of like a squat little tiny um, plane almost that looks like a cross between an F-22 and an F-35, except it's like a little sausage version. And then I ended up with this shape here, which turned out to be the final. It has the big, let me get a brighter color. Has the big kind of bulbous UAV front, which I got from this design, which I think is the Reaper, I think the Predator. I'm not sure which one's the Predator, but this is the UAV kind of drone that I had in mind with the nice bulbous simple front. But I wanted to make the back wings kind of hexagonal and high-tech like the F-22s or the F-35 fighter jets. So I kind of combined those in one, and I liked that shape, so I added the rail on the bottom. So that's how I got to the overall design that I chose. And usually, like if I know I want to, I'll do sketches like these in the beginning just to kind of organize my thoughts and, you know, standard design stuff, sort of explore and think about it for a second before I jump in. All right, let's move on. All right. So I have my sketch. I'm happy with the idea. I have the form in my head, and I decided to um, block it out in 3D and mostly, we'll see how far I can get in 3D anyway. I end up going pretty far. And for this one, I wanted to start in ZBrush. It's always different depending on the concept and what I'm working on, what tool suits the job. And so for this one, I have this kind of smooth and slightly aerodynamic, kind of softly curved, very specific shape. So I started in ZBrush because it's easy to, in my opinion, it's easier to get to those kind of like more arbitrary shapes. I'm basically taking like the front of a Predator drone, and I'm putting F-22 plane wings on the back. And you know, if I was going to model that out in sub Ds or in polys, it would probably, I don't know, it would just probably be a little harder. Because ZBrush is so just freeform and, you know, kind of do whatever you want. So as you can see, I'm just starting to get the shape together, starting to get the proportions. Very, very simple. And I have my sketch out on my desk next to me, so I'm kind of always referring to it, and I'm kind of checking what I liked from the sketch. I don't always work that way, but for this instance, when I had a very specific design I wanted to chase down, I'll do it. What else? I'm just using a big, like a really big pinch brush right there to get that crease to come out on the form, because I know I want it to be kind of a part of the personality. And in terms of you know, inside outside or covered versus exposed on this design, there isn't a lot that's exposed, but I know there will be a little bit. But so what that means to me as a designer is that the hull or the body of the plane or the drone, sorry, is going to be really specific, and I want a very specific shape. So I actually end up spending a lot of time like really doing kind of like a lot of subtle changes and a lot of kind of big and soft moves and really getting the proportions right where I want them, because I love that. I'm really trying to chase down that aeronautic, like that really high-tech aeronautic feel that's happening in planes and drones right now, with the really they're almost futuristic. Like I was saying, the F-35 and the F-22 fighter jets, as well as all the recent drones, they just have this look that's so minimized and so sort of pared down that um, I I wanted to capture some of that in the body of the plane, and so um, because I'm not going to be cutting into the plane very much and exposing a lot, I wanted to get the overall shape really down really well. So here you can see I'm adding on the wings, excuse me, and I'm using the curve quad fill brush, I think. And I love this brush because in photo it kind of makes ZBrush like a drawing tool to me, in that um, you literally just draw some curves and like a form pops out in space, and it feels like Photoshop in that way to me. It makes it really intuitive and enjoyable. Um, so you can see I'm just positioning that new geometry I made, and then I'm dynameshing everything together so I fuse it with the rest of the body. And right here I'm trying to figure out how to actually get the shape of these wings to be aerodynamic. Um, and so I have to kind of fool with it and clip it and kind of beat on it for a little bit before it feels right. I just need the edges to taper, and the tips to get really thin, um, before I move on. So I kind of got there. I just got it started, and then I join it with the rest of the body, and then I kind of continue on doing big adjustments. As you can see here, that's another reason why ZBrush is so much fun, is that you can just grab large parts and you know, do what you will with them. So I'm still really thinking, broad strokes. I'm still looking at my sketch. I'm still checking proportions. I'm actually looking at the planes I was talking about a lot as I go, just to make sure I have that visual language in my head, just to make sure I'm chasing, I don't kind of keep sculpting off into a random direction. Because again, as I was saying, I'm really going for the specific, like that feeling of these real planes. Even though I'm making up this device, it's totally based on things that exist. So yeah, just lots of noodling, and I jumped forward a few times in this video, but I try not to leave any of the important steps out. I think that um, by the time it's done, you should have a good idea how I got from A to B. Um, Here I am putting the back fins in, again with the quad, what is it, curve quad fill brush, I think it's called. I love this thing. And as I said, as I was saying, I'm still dealing in big shapes. I'm still just blocking it all in and getting it all to work at this level of detail. Nothing fancy yet. So I have the whole top body kind of in place. It's not perfect yet, but it's definitely sitting well in terms of overall proportion. So I moved on to the bottom component, which is like this rail shape that has whatever mechanisms or devices inside it, and then the sphere at the front. And it takes me a little bit to get everything in proportion. But again, I wanted to, here I've jumped ahead a little bit, and you can see I'm starting to clean up the bottom form after I messed with it a little bit. But again, the reason that I wanted to, it took me a little bit to get to the size of this thing right and the shape just right, because I wanted it to feel appropriate to the size of the plane. I wanted it to look big enough so that the drone overall looks smaller. And later on, I shrink it down even more because I wanted to make sure it looks like it could sort of fit inside the drone. Like maybe the drone kind of lowers it or extends it at some point before it uses the weapon. Um, and that is sort of a byproduct of the thinking around, inside outside. If I'm telling myself, okay, this component needs to fit inside the drone at some point, one, the opening for the component on the bottom of the drone needs to be big enough, and this thing needs to be small enough to go inside. And I think by the end of by the time I'm done with all of this, I think it still actually looks like maybe a little too big for that to happen perfectly, but I worked towards it, and I nudged it in that direction so that at least it felt like it falls into that kind of read where, okay, this looks like a subcomponent of the larger plane. Here I am adding a little detail to the sphere, and I've got it in my head that this is like a laser weapon. So there's like an iris or an opening or a lens on the front of it, and it takes me a little while to figure out exactly how to go about getting this what I want in terms of details, but this kind of thing's really easy in ZBrush because of all the radial symmetry and things like that. So I don't focus on details everywhere because it's just my ZBrush sculpt. But on the here again, I've jumped ahead, but on the little laser ball, I knew I wanted a couple specific things, so I took the time to get it on there. Here I am making a hole for the rail, and thinking of this as like the hatch or the small little tiny bay that might be in the belly of this drone. And you can see the hole isn't big enough to fit the entire weapon, but like I said just a second ago, later on I shrink the rail. All I'm doing now is just refining a little bit. I'm kind of trying to get a mix of hard edges and soft edges because it's an aerodynamic machine, but there are openings that are flat and sort of clean that I want to get in there because I want it to feel like, okay, this is one of the more engineered parts of the hull that has an opening and needs to function a certain way. So I'm planning on showing things inside this hole later on. And right now, all I'm doing is I'm preparing sort of the lip and the outside of the plane to have an exposed area. So inside and outside can also work in that way when you're designing, in that you can plan on, okay, what parts of my machine are going to open up and what parts are going to be just totally covered and smooth. So you can get it to start reading like, oh, this is supposed to open here, or this is where a door goes, or a hatch, or an opening, or it's been cut open here, or whatever it is, before you even draw or design the detailed machinery that goes inside. So that, and if you do approach things like that, where you really make the outside machine look like there's supposed to be an opening somewhere, and then you draw the details inside that opening, those two things together will really work to your benefit. So yeah, I'm just still refining the sculpt a bit. You could see I was cleaning up edges there, and I decided to add a couple little tiny, I think, yes, these were in my sketch, these small little wings on the side of the weapon rail, or weapon housing rather. And here I'm like trying to figure out, okay, how do I taper this whole shape using a really low poly piece of geo and the Z modeler brush, but I finally figured it out. took me a second. And this tool's fun right here, using the way I got the simple low poly geo is I use the initialize button on a subtool that had just some geometry I didn't want in it, and it replaces it with whatever's in there with a very simple primitive. And in this case I used a cube, and then I squashed it down and added some lines so that I could I added some edge loops so that I could taper it a bit like this. And this is I'm also using the Z modeler brush in conjunction with that, and these are all fairly new features in ZBrush, but they're a ton of fun, and they're really great because when you have something that you want to do that it will do well, it just makes things really easy. So it's, in this case, it's almost like subdivision modeling, but inside ZBrush. And that's nothing new. You know, that information's out there. The Z modeler has been around for a little while now, but just mentioning, you know, making sure I show a little example. So I've cleaned things up a little bit more, as you can see, and I've been smoothing out and making sure the big shapes are where they are. And one of the ways that, so this rail was a lot sharper right here, and one of the ways I've gotten it to a cleaner, oh, ZBrush crashed on me. Or no, it didn't. Anyway, I keep recording, looks like. But one of the ways I cleaned that shape up after I kind of brushed in some detail and some refinement is by using clay polish, which I love, and I highly recommend if you're using ZBrush and you are messing around with hard surface stuff, click the clay polish button once in a while, because it sort of just cleans up your whole shape in a way that's really appropriate for hard surface stuff. So anyway, here I'm just going through more steps, trying to get the shapes where I want them, trying to make sure I have enough geo to work with, and for whatever reason I decided to clean this piece up. I think it's so that the later changes I did were a little easier. So I'm coming around, all the big parts are feeling good, so I start to add some surface detail and some surface breakup. And spoiler alert, I'll tell you now that even though I put in some time and effort into these little details, I end up actually like painting over some of them later on because they're too thick and soft, and in the render they just didn't feel tight and machine-like enough. But I also wanted to put these details in because I wanted to make sure that I had some cues and I had some lines and stuff that on the surface for later, whenever I was painting or drawing over this, that could like remind me of what shapes to do, make sure that they all fall into the similar language. So in a sense, I'm sort of like, even though I paint over a little bit of this, I'm sort of guaranteeing that it's there, and I'll be thinking about it later so I don't forget about that part of the design. It's almost like, it's sort of a form of like leaving myself a note for later, except it's all over the place. So anyway, yeah, I'm just trying to come up with some panel lines that feel kind of high-tech, and they feel sort of hexagonal, and like they fit this new school modern stealth airplane look, because I know that's like the whole personality of this thing. So I've jumped forward again once I finished the sculpt, got it to a good place. I bring it into Modo, and for this one I thought, hey, let me do something kind of simple and texture this thing with just a quick planar projection, and I'll just grab some airplane parts and some paneling from aircraft and just sort of make a texture that is not going to be perfect at all, but I'm just going to project it from the top so that I have some surface information, and so that it's kind of like, you know, sometimes I paint this kind of thing in on top of a render or a screenshot, or I draw it in. But for this one, I just kind of wanted to make sure I had enough surface detail, surface noise, I wanted it to feel like metal or the side of a aircraft. So I don't know. I just kind of opted for this technique. I wanted it to feel real as well, which is another reason I added some detail, or added, excuse me, some photo textures. Um, so here you can see I went to textures.com, which used to be CG Textures, and it's kind of a really popular, place to go for artists. Um, there are more and more texture sites popping up now, which is awesome. But I just happened to go to this one that's been around for a while because I just wanted to go quickly, and I have an account there, and I could download this stuff easily. So here I am in Photoshop, and I have grabbed a bottom up screenshot of my model, and I'm just going to use that as a template for making my diffuse texture. So all I'm doing now is I'm just getting the shape of the plane, of the drone, sorry, for myself, and so that I can fill it in with a flat color and have that be my main clipping mask, so that everything everything falls inside of this shape. This is very, very, very simple kind of texturing stuff that's very straightforward. Like I said, it's just a planar projection. So I jump forward once again. I'm a little farther into the texture. I'm moving big parts around, and now at the end, I'm kind of just starting to add a few, move around some smaller details, get a little bit of cleaner machine-like detail with the straight lines and the bolts and stuff, because it's, even though it's subtle, again, I want the surface detail to be right. I want it to be of a certain scale. I want it to feel a certain way. I want it to have certain shapes inside of it, because back to the talk about surface detail, this is a futuristic plane. It's a plane. It's not a spaceship that was teleported in from another dimension. No, it's a metal plane that humans made. So I want to communicate that. And I know that sounds very, very obvious and simple, like, well, yeah, Joe, you made a plane, so maybe make it look like a plane, right? Duh. But while, yes, it's obvious, I'm also reiterating on the intentionality or the deliberate decisions I'm making regarding just the surface detail by itself, right? Because it enhances and it feeds into your design, and it will affect the final look of your design if you're very deliberate about your surface detailing. Because with machines, they carry their story on their surface. They tell you how they're built. They tell you when they were built, and so on and so forth. So, excuse me. Jumping around a little bit. I'm back in Photoshop, and I got my texture looking right. I put in some futuristic sort of hexagons and triangles and things so it felt right. And now what I'm doing, I'm just kind of tweaking the colors, tweaking the brightness, and I'm also making a black and white version so that I have like a spec or a roughness map for myself. Very, very simple. I'm just blowing out the contrast and saving a different file so that when I feed it into the roughness of the material, I just get some specularity breakup on the surface when I render this thing. It's like two materials. So back into Modo, I'm just getting this file off the ground. I'm trying to get some outside lighting going. I'm trying to tweak the material and get the texture map working. It's all kind of legit, not, it's just sort of technical stuff that, lots of buttons being pressed and settings being tweaked so that things look right. The necessary part of the process, but it's kind of like one of the more of the technical stuff that I think that anyone can learn. If you want the information, it's out there. But I'm much more interested in talking to you. Here I am shrinking the rail, by the way, because at some point I noticed like proportionately is a little too strong. So I'll be making tweaks and changes like that all the time. But anyway, as I was saying, I'd much rather talk about principles of design and the thinking behind good design, or at least what I hope is good design. um, Rather than telling you like, oh, hey, here's the button to load an HDR map in Modo. It's like that information is definitely, it's there to come by. So as I've been chatting, I jumped ahead again just a little bit, and I added some details and some pieces in the bottom. I had my preset browser open, and I have a bunch of meshes that are, it's very common to kit bash things nowadays. You should all probably know what it entails, but I have a bunch of meshes I made myself that I plugged in right there. And I think I modeled a very simple rectangular rail. If you can see that geometry between the white part and the body of the drone, that's all the stuff I just added. And that's kind of mostly that's the exposed stuff, right? That's the conjoining clamps and the rails and the hinges that the flaps open up with and all that. So I'm still tweaking. I made added some more materials. I added some metal to the inside parts. I made the sphere shinier and made it like a reflective plastic, and which actually probably wouldn't be the case in real life, because you don't really want bright shiny things on your stealth weapon, right? Right. But looks cool. I love white things, so I put the white sphere on there because it has that medical kind of high-tech feeling. So I just left it. And then I noticed, of course, in my texture map, I didn't include the bottom fins here. So here I am back in Photoshop with my file, just adding that and extending the texture down a bit so that I'm covering the tail and so on. So this is what the texture looks like without very many adjustments. I don't know if this is what I had on there earlier, but and it doesn't look, since I'm projecting this texture from the top down, it gets a little weird on the sides of the plane, but you'll see later that I just sort of paint over the really funky parts and try to obscure it a little bit so that it doesn't kind of stand out as much. And if I want to use 3D to my benefit, right? I want to go as fast as possible, so I'm not gonna like retopologize. I don't know what I was doing there. I think I was testing my hotkey for flipping things horizontally. But I'm not going to UV stuff, and then do perfect texture maps. I want to move quick and move fast, and so that's why this is just a top-down projection through the entire plane. And I think I had tested out my texture maps and thought they were too dark or too light or something, so I adjusted it again there. And here I am lining up the projection planes so that it covers the whole thing. And it's feeling decent as a whole, so I start messing around with placing another drone in there, because I start to feel like, oh, it's kind of weird, just this one vehicle against the sky. This is supposed to be a design talk, but now this is more of like the illustration that presents the design stuff. So it's sort of a different topic, sort of not. It all kind of falls into place, but I wanted to make sure that you saw all the steps I was taking, like I said, so that I don't bust out the final image and you just think, okay, what the hell happened? How'd you do that? But overall, I'm happy with this because I have the materials feeling stealthy, and at this point, I kind of feel like something's missing. And I looked at other drones and realized I looked at real life UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, I think it is, and drones. And there's a few of them that definitely had cameras out on the surface of the aircraft. So I put a camera in the front there, and I had some more detail on the laser weapon on the body of the large component there. I had more detail in there in my sketch. So here I am just kind of modeling it in Modo. And I like this technique because, and this technique, by this technique I mean doing a lot of sculpting in ZBrush, getting everything in place, and then coming into Modo and doing some of the more clean, crispy modeling. That's like a lot of times I find like the exposed hardware or the straight kind of parts of certain machines are easier to model in a package like this, in a program like this, because there are the polygonal modeling tools make it really easy. So, and then it comes out really crispy and crispy and sort of clean and perfect. So I'm kind of just using different programs for different reasons. And here again, I'm adding some detail, just some clamps and connections and things to show that there's that these parts I'm adding are kind of attached to the bottom of the rail, and kind of show the expose the connections just a little bit, right? And so here I am, trying to. This is me trying to balance out the exposed parts and the covered parts, right? So I'm adding just enough in Modo to make sure that there's some little mechanical details, some kind of structural details, stuff like that. I put I don't even think you see it in the final render, but I put some sort of circular parts in there just in case, like if the light hit it or it could catch a reflection, then you'd see that there was something in there. And then something felt really funny, and I realized, oh, I haven't given this thing the pod bay, the hatch doors. So I model in just some simple geo to be like the flaps that open up on the bottom here. And I'm kind of eyeballing this. I sort of just place it, and I assign the same material as the plane onto this geo, and then I just kind of mirror it to the other side and move on. But before that, here I am. I'm still tweaking this geometry from ZBrush. As you can see, it's like a mess, but I decimated it enough so that I could work with it just a little bit. Just still nudging things and tweaking, just trying to get everything to sit. And I also, if you notice there, I lowered these parts a bit, so there's some negative space between all the mechanical bits, and it helps make it feel kind of believable and sort of realistic, because I always see that on real machines. So here I am checking out the new details, making sure the materials are okay, and I'm trying to find a nice HDR map to light this whole thing with, so that the form is lit enough to read, and it feels like outside and in the sky. And so I kind of come back and forth to this quite a bit. But overall, the design's feeling okay to me, because I have this nice simple. It's clearly like a futuristic drone because these wings are like hexagonal and it looks kind of high tech. But I've opened up the belly and I'm showing the kind of these exposed rails and giblets that hold on to this like weird kind of weapon that, and the weapon is such that I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it looks kind of ominous to me, and it looks kind of high tech. So uh, the whole thing is feeling, you know, pretty decent, pretty decent. Still a lot to do, but I like where it is. So jump ahead again here, trying to get the sort of the illustration to feel right. And I realized that, it's feeling a little empty, and I thought to sell the idea might be smart to put in an additional one or two drones up in the sky, kind of make it look like there's a small squadron of them, and they're flying together. Maybe they're smaller vehicles so they can fly closer together. They can fly in little um, special missions. So I get that down before I move on to Photoshop. Before I got into the Photoshop part, I wanted to make sure you saw my passes that I got out of Moto. One of them's the alpha. The other one with all the colors is the um, clown pass, which just makes it easy to select parts if I want to later. Mostly what I use the most is the alpha layer, because it just has the selection of the planes and stuff. So this next section's pretty straightforward Photoshop stuff. I'm just trying to work towards getting these to feel like really high in the sky, but also that we're looking up at them. And it turns out to be, I don't know, it's a little tricky, but I just sort of bash on it until it feels okay. I have a few photos I just got online that I'm just trying to get to work together. Um, Nothing really fancy here, just layers and masks and erasing a bunch of stuff out to get it to come together. Um, it's fun though. I mean, sometimes I do concepts that really it's just about the design. I want to show exactly where the parts are, where the pieces are, and then there's a whole other side to concept art, which is um, sort of illustrative. I mean, it's you kind of put your design in context. You show what it does, how it does it, and in order to sell it all the more clearly. And I think it's obviously best to be able to do both. I'm certainly better at just designing something up close because I love all the details and the the niblets and the tiny touches that you can see after when I'm really trying to make something specific. I enjoy that kind of thing. But there's definitely a huge place for this kind of piece and skill set as well. Probably do me well to work on it some more. But yeah, anyway, just trying to get the sky to sit, trying to get it to feel right. I end up with a ton of layers, and you can see I'm adding them as I go. And to make it easier on myself, I'm just making new layers for everything because I don't want to remember where things are, and I'm trying to just go forward and not worry about flattening them or grouping them too much. It's kind of it's a little bit sloppy actually, but I don't advise doing that. But I was trying to just move forward and make decisions without giving myself the option of tweaking things or adjusting things later. So anyway, what's there to talk about? For all the attention and effort I put into the design on this and the thinking around the surface detail and stuff, it doesn't all come across in this illustration as clearly as I would like it to, because it's we have a kind of very broad flat lighting, and it's very diffuse lighting on the bottom of the drones. So all the detail and all the tiny little shapes are, they kind of mush together. Um, but but I will say that regardless of that, the attention that I did put on putting in just enough detail, putting in some of that exposed machinery, and designing the shot so we see the bottom um, of this weapon and the attachment points and all that, as well as the attention I put on the silhouette of the drone. I think all those things come together so that even though we can't see every little bolt and tiny little detail across the surface as clear as day, that the overall design, it does its job. It reads, it feels like a futuristic drone in the middle of the sky. And what I'm trying to say is, I don't think all that effort was for nothing. I think it comes together to paint the picture of this design that I've thought of. So yeah, I'm just and I realize, oh, let me do some contrails because it's a little, we got a little illustration here. Let's paint the picture a little bit. So I do some really really cheap, just soft airbrush painting, and um, I probably could have put some. I don't know. I kept trying to think of more detail to paint onto to the drones, but like, no, putting a light or putting anything else on these that was reflective would just kind of defeat the purpose. So I'm just like, okay, these things are supposed to be matte and gray and hard to see, so let me just try and paint other things in the picture to make it convincing. And this stuff's kind of fun. Another thing that I'm concerned with at this point, and I'm kind of relying on my design to tell this story, but the scale of these ships or these drones is something that's of concern to me, and I'm not sure that I put in enough to show exactly like how big these or small these things are. So that's kind of a lingering issue that I think is still sort of confusing. But my hope is that because I put a lot of them on here, it feels like um, they're a bit smaller and they sort of like swarm out together. I have no idea if that's coming across, but that was my thinking anyway. So I wanted some material on this lens that I didn't get in the render, so I'm just doing some really simple, colorful reflections to show that the glass is tinted. Very, very simple stuff. I mean, the render is pretty straightforward. Um, and I think pretty soon here I start to try to paint over the render. Like I was saying, I don't, I textured this thing very simply. I made a very simple material, so it's not quite right everywhere. I mean, the texture is projecting all the way through the vehicle. So I do a little bit of painting over just to take care of the couple of the things that are bothering me. And this is really straightforward stuff. I'm just really like painting right on top of the render with opaque brushes. No tricks or anything. I'm just sort of hiding things out, simplifying things, and I want to get, uh, back to, the notion of the surface detail. I don't have it's not, what am I trying to say? Regarding the surface detail, the funky texturing I did sort of broke that in a few small places. And I want to make sure that there's enough of it that comes across, right? So when I projected the texture all the way from the top, it was making lines that weren't very high tech. So I erased over them and uh, kind of fixed them and added a little bit, as you saw just a second ago. And here I'm just kind of just cleaning up a little bit, nothing fancy. Um, Just doing a little bit of integration to help. And here's a big error, I guess, is that my texture wasn't projecting all the way through, all the way over my geometry. So there's some white there that I just needed to fix real quick in Photoshop. Again, none of this is very fancy. I'm just kind of integrating the render to look a little bit more finished, and fixing a couple of things that I did quickly in 3D. There's a little bit of an opportunity to keep adding some futuristic panel lines and make sure that it's kind of clean. I didn't model the jet turbine, not the turbine, but the thruster at the end. So I look at the reference. I kind of try to cut the panel up a little bit to make it look like it fits the design. Got to get those little stealth triangles in there. And again, I'm not just cutting open the plane and saying, yeah, here's the fuselage. No, I want to make sure that these details fit, and I'm kind of adding, information that reinforces my design, right? Back to basics. So I think another reason I don't want to emphasize workflow and techniques in these videos is that I just don't know what to say at times like this. It's like, yeah, I'm painting in the jet, so watch me paint the jet in. I keep trying to tie everything back into like the two lessons I proposed, surface detail and inside outside. And, it's like I try to give you your money's worth and make it a nice clear video, but sometimes it's like, okay, I'm just painting. What else do you want me to say? So, yeah, a couple more details. Just a bit. I'm treating it just a little bit more, so that all the details kind of come together, I guess, a little bit better. And my fiance walked in the room and said, "Well, that's cool, babe. Why is the sky so bright and happy and blue? Like, what? Why don't you do a scary, apocalyptic sky?" And I just thought of course, I need to do that. And what the hell was I thinking? I got a picture of war machines here. Let me make this picture a little more aggro. Like, hello. So, yeah, I was just messing around with a blur there. I want to just add some depth with some blurring. I'm trying to just do a few quick moves in Photoshop to kind of bring this together. I like the more angry kind of tone of the picture with the dark red sky. I don't know if it's like pollution or a nuclear blast or dusk, or maybe it's all three of those, but it just feels cooler, feels more appropriate. And since I rendered the planes with a blue sky, there's blue light being reflected onto the planes, right? So I did a hue saturation layer, and I just chose cyan and blue, I think, and tweaked the colors so that the blue color turned into orange to help match it to the environment. And here I realized that the laser could be a little more aggro, and I wanted to add like a red dot kind of, and I wanted to actually, funny enough, I wanted to kind of show the device a little bit more, show the functionality of this weapon a bit. So I kind of, I cut that front circular plate off, and I'm exposing this this laser beam generator, excuse me, to tell the story of the weapon a little bit more. And plus, I just think it looks more pissed off this way. So I feel like it really helped, actually. And I wasn't sure if I was going to do that, but I did it at the end. Um, so you can still paint over your 3D after you get pretty far. Okay, here we are with the final drone design piece. So let's talk about the design just for a second. Well, before I jump into that, I just want to say that I know this is kind of more of an illustration. I had to make a decision at one point to either um, really do like a more clean, sort of simple view of this so that I could really showcase like the details in the design, or do more of like an illustration like this with a bit more of a setting and some photo elements and things. And even though this video series is about design practices and design ideas, I went ahead and did the more illustrative finished render for this guy because I don't know, I just kind of liked where it was going. I wanted to look up at it because I think that's where the personality is, and it just kind of felt right putting it in the sky and everything. So maybe I could have done something in between where I rendered it from this angle, but I did line art and clean, simple rendering over it just to show the design and the details. But I didn't, because I kept chasing this view down and adjusting the colors, and I made it more of like a dusky nuclear sunset thing, and just sort of ended up with this piece. But I like it. I'm good with it. But with that said, let's talk about the design a bit and um, how the two notions of surface detailing and exposing the machine come into play on this piece. So for me, the surface detailing is pretty evident. I have these like high-tech patterns on the drone that I was inspired by. That when I drew them out, I was inspired by like F-22s and modern planes, and kind of the most recent like stealth uh, vehicles that are out there and things like that. And there aren't any, visible bolts. Well, there are a couple tiny ones, but I sort of left them in there to show that we can still tell, that this thing was made by humans, and it's got paneling and bolting so that we recognize what we see, which is an easy way to what I call bringing it back down to earth. So you kind of put a few notes in there to say, look, even if this is a futuristic device, there are still some bolts and some recognizable little clasps and some details that are easy to decipher, so that oh, okay, this is made by humans and made in sort of modern times and so on. But on top of that, or in addition, like I was saying, I had these kind of more stealthy, kind of modern design lines and details in here so that it feels more futuristic, right? And I'm sort of like placing my, not only does the shape of this entire thing place this sort of it places this design in um, a period of time and a class of machine. So it's a stealth airplane. In this case, it's a drone, but and it also says, hey, I was probably made around the year 2020 or a little bit beyond that, and so on. And then we have the this laser eye, which also says, hey, I've never, to me as a designer, it says I've never seen a weapon like that, so maybe this thing was built in the future. But back to my point, which is, yes, I have this futuristic, stealthy silhouette and form to the entire design, but the details and the thinking and the reasoning behind the details um, reinforce that idea. So they're acting in symposium, and that's something that I think you want to do when you're designing a machine, because um, you can really confuse the viewer if these kinds of things don't line up. And you can muddle, if you're trying to be really deliberate with your design, you can confuse its cause or the purpose of its existence as a machine, as a weapon, and so on. So having those two things work in harmony always makes for the best designs. The other aspect of this design is the covered versus exposed, and I don't think that that aspect is necessarily very loud on these drones, on this drone design, but it is existent. So we have, again, we have the clean, external hull of this small drone aircraft. I have kind of like a medium piece, which is the camera that's on the nose, and that has a lens showing, but it's not terribly like, that's not an incredibly obvious example of, oh hey, here's the inside of the machine. When we start to get that is a little more, is down here, farther down, and we start to see these flaps are open, so we're seeing inside, and we see some of these supports and just a little bit of the metal and seams of where this big rail comes out of, or where it's attached to. And this is kind of like, to me, this feels like sort of a medium amount of exposure right here in the middle, because it's not necessarily opened up to the air, but we start to see in between a little bit. We're seeing this piece of metal that kind of holds these this radar deflectors or whatever they are. They just look kind of stealthy to me. Kind of holds these pieces, and we're just seeing a little bit of the construction and the logic of the machine. So I didn't pick a design that necessarily has a lot of exposed innards coming out to the outside. It's mostly just down, in this area, little bit here. But I kind of made the decision that, hey, I want to make a drone. I am sort of having fun with the idea, and because it's an aircraft, because it's a drone, it doesn't necessarily have an excuse, at least in this case anyway. It doesn't necessarily have an excuse to have a ton of exposed stuff everywhere and opening up the bottom here and showing all kinds of exposed machinery. It just doesn't make sense, because this thing is aerodynamic, it's a stealth weapon, it's got a job to do, and so on and so forth. So I hope you enjoyed this last demo, and I know, sorry if the inner and outer example or aspect of this design isn't as super clear or as loud as it could have been, but I hope that you can still see that even on this stealthy vehicle, that the notion of inner and outer still plays a part here, because I wanted to expose this this other component to the machine down here. So it still kicks in even on a design like this. Anyway, I hope all the ideas are kind of in your head and you can see how I used them here. Hope you enjoyed watching the drone come together. And I think that's it for these videos. Thank you once again for supporting these and checking them out. And as always, I really just hope that you're left with some notions and some ideas about how to approach things, how to tackle mechanical designs, and the different options and elements you can use to kind of bring everything together. Um, have fun drawing and go forth and do something mechanical. Thanks again, guys. See you on the next one.